I was always told how terrible I was as a husband, not good enough as a parent. And what I got told at work is, you're amazing, Andre. So I found that I was gravitating towards the things that made my self-worth increase. Remembering I came from a place where my self-worth was a train wreck. So the marriage became, really? Coming home from a trip where I got lots of accolades, walking back into the house, and even though I love my kids, it just became really challenging. So consequently, my wife as well, we sort of went on this trajectory at that stage, and she told me, I had enough. She called it and said, I'm done.
Was there relief in some of that for you as well?
There was relief because it got away from the pain. And then I didn't realize, but it also created massive pain for me, because I didn't realize how much not being home with my children meant to me.
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. And now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Andre, welcome.
Hi, Harry. Good to be here.
Good to have you. All right. Okay. So for the listeners, Andre has a background in HR, established forums presence in India. He's an executive coach, a presenter, co-founder of Shanti Day, and a director and speaker at Ariel Group Australasia. So from your extensive experience and the fact that you were recommended from another one of our guests as well, I'm really excited to explore your journey and how you got to where you are and the life lessons you've learned along the way. But before we dive into that, first, how do you define success?
Wow. I've been trying to figure that out for a long time, Harry, and I think I'm on my way to me. And I think it's different for different people, but I can talk about me. And before I start, I guess I just want to say just a couple of things, like almost a disclaimer, if that's okay, is that, I've lived my life in a brown skin as a able-bodied, heterosexual, middle-class male, baby boomer who's had the privilege of education. So I carry a few blind spots with me. So I just want to put that out there. So when we start thinking about questions like how do you define success, a lot of it has been kind of what's programmed into me growing up, and I've had to unprogram and reprogram myself going forward. But right now, 2023, I've landed on this place that says living my life in concert with my values. That's the short answer. And it's taken me a long time to actually figure out what those values are. For many, many years, in fact, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have looked at some goal achievement or something around, my net worth or those sorts of measures. Now, I think I've landed on this place that says, if I live every day of my life in concert with my values, if I do the work and set the goals in concert with my values, then I'm a happy camper. I'm good. And I think I've landed on that, and I find a lot of fulfillment coming out of navigating that way. So
and thank you for sharing that. Like what I heard immediately as you were sharing it, while you're also talking about your past, right? And in the past, you would have, it sounded like you really valued, or you defined success as how much money you're able to earn or how much wealth you're able to achieve or accumulate. And it sounds like that was your value at the time. Was that still living your life in concert with that value?
No, it wasn't. I think I didn't. It was a disconnect with values. I was focused very much on goals, not so much on values. I've kind of had this stuff on values sitting on my shoulder for a while, and it's sort of, as I've got older, it's emerged, and it's now right center stage with me. I think I still have goals, and I think they're two separate things. So you have goals and you have values. As it might be teaching uh, anyone who's listening.
This is a good distinction, please.
Yeah. So goals, things you strive for, achieve. I think there's a guy called uh, I think his name is James Cast, and he talked about infinite and finite games. And finite games have a beginning and end. Goals are very much finite games. You start, you play, and there's an end time. If you think about a football match, for example, an infinite game is one that continues on and on. So when I sit down and think about goals, I think about it as a finite kind of thing. It has a use by date, whereas values don't have use by date. It's about how you progress your life. So let's take an example, a really simple example. Climbing Everest. Let's assume I decide to climb Everest. My goal is to get to the top, is to get to the summit. Uh, the values that sit underneath that could be adventure or fame, or it doesn't matter. It's different for different people. But once I hit the top of Everest, right, my goal is going to change. I might want to go and climb another peak, but the value is sustained. Adventure or fame, whatever, that will then erupt in different ways. So I think about values as the infinite game. It's what you kind of do along the journey. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And now I'm curious more around your mindset of how you apply that. Like, are you then now in this sense of being able to live a more fulfilled and more successful life? Are you choosing your values or identifying your values? That's probably the first question. And then
Mm.
are you doing that first to then identify the goals that will help you achieve those values, or the goals allow you to experience those values?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it's a matter of identifying those values, not setting it. For some time I thought values are something you choose, but I think values are something that you reveal. It's something that shows up just based on your life uh, experiences you've kind of had along the way, and probably there's a little bit of nature nurture type stuff. I don't know the answer to where they come from, but it's what is important to you, and it's different for different people. And when you sit down and try and figure out what that is, like if you ask people, like a lot of people ask people about their values, and I do quite a lot of values kind of work with people when they ask me for that. People always go to the one, our family or health. I always talk about what are the five, what are the things, because sometimes the second, third, and fourth and fifth ones, they kind of jockey for position a little bit. So for me, identifying those values was the starting point, and that's something I do on a regular basis. I have five, and every year I go and sit under a tree for a couple of hours and sit down and think about how's this showing up? Is this real for me as I go into the next year? Is this something I want to focus on, or do I need to adjust it a little bit? And I found that probably I've been doing this for the last 7 or 8 years.
And
They don't take a lot. There's a little bit of fine tuning, but they haven't changed much. They really haven't. Really
and
haven't. Go ahead.
so I'd imagine that you've been describing how values influence the outcomes, probably more so than goals, right? Values actually
Yeah.
influence what we do, how we act, and a lot of it's based on our default programming. But people who are listening to this podcast are wanting to change their lives. They're wanting to improve their lives. And a conclusion I'd imagine a lot of people come to from listening to this is, well, you just got to choose your values, or at least choose how you live your life in line with them. But then you're
Mm,
saying you can't choose your values. They're pretty much
no.
already set. You can then reveal them. So what's been your process in terms of identifying your values and then personal growth? How do you move from
Yeah.
one to the other?
Yeah. So the identifying your values is a long process. It's a lot of self connecting with self. So, I've had to figure out who I am. So if I can go back and tell you a bit of a story, that might help.
Please,
Yeah.
please.
So, and this might reveal a little bit about who I am as a person. So I was born in India, grew up here in Australia. My parents immigrated when I was 12 years old. And I was put into a really nice school, in fact, a fantastic school. But I was, probably the only brown kid in the entire school. And I struggled. I really struggled in belonging, in actually trying to feel like I belonged. And I didn't really feel like I belonged. At best, I fitted in, right? And I tried desperately to fit in, but I never felt that sense of belonging. So I started putting on, I guess, a lot of these masks. And one of those ones is I became a people pleaser. The way for survival for me was to not upset anyone, is to make sure everybody was happy. So essentially, I parked my values. I became what anybody wanted me to become. I lived my life based on the expectation others had because it seemed that was the path of least resistance and survival for me. Yeah. And as I started to grow up and emerge, and life has a way of throwing you challenge after challenge after challenge, I started to recognize and connect with myself that probably for the first half of my life, I had been this people pleaser, this person who had diminished themselves a little bit for the sake of being what other people wanted.
When you say
And
first
that,
half of your life,
yeah,
how many years are we talking? How many decades?
I'm talking, I look at it in terms of the first half of my adult life. I would say probably to when I turned 50, Harry.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm talking, if you look at life,
Mm.
the first 20 years of your life mathematically, or, people live, I guess, healthy to the age of 80. If you look at the first 20 years, which is all about educating, learning how to brush your teeth, tie your shoelaces, do your hair, um, your life actually, adult life starts in your 20s. And I guess I look at it from there. So 20 till about your mid 50s is about half time, right? And something funny happens at halftime. It happened for me anyway. It's like a football game, and I keep coming back to that metaphor, analogy. Halftime, you sort of go into the change rooms, and the coach sits down and talks about how was the first half of your life, and you have a look at that and think, well, how am I going to play the second half? I think it's a very close thing that happened to me because I had to sit down, and I was actually forced to sit down and look at how I spent the first half of my life and how I wanted to spend the second half of my life. And that was the point where I started to think about what was really important for me. To recognize that I had become this people pleaser. I was a very popular person. Everybody liked me, but I didn't like myself that much, right? Because it was putting all of these masks on. And that was the start of me trying to figure out who. So that connection with self was really the wake up call. And the values clarification, if you like, took probably, and it's ongoing, but it took probably a few months for me to sit down and go, what's really important to me, and to sit down and look back and really figure out what those things were, and then fine tune them as I went. So I'm happy to share what they are. I mean, there's 5 of them,
Please, that
which kind of,
that might help the listeners.
yeah. Um, the first one, and this is not in priority order, as I said, they jockey for position. So the first one for me was autonomy, is to have the freedom to do what I want to do and not be at the beck and call of others. Now, as you mentioned at the intro, I had a very successful corporate life. But one of the things that used to bug me was people would make decisions about my salary, my job, my promotions, my performance without me in the room. Yeah. And I always felt I was working for somebody else, creating value for some other person rather than what was important for me. So autonomy was a really big one, and that forced me to actually quit my corporate career and start my own company. That's one. The second one came a bit later because I almost died 8 years ago. So something went wrong. I was having a procedure, and something went wrong, and I was conscious on the operating theater, and they had to bring in the defibrillator, the crash cart. They thought my heart was going to stop, and my blood pressure dropped, and they tilted my bed, and all sorts of things happened. At that moment, someone said, Andre, I was just confused. I was awake. What's happening? And they said, you've just gone into critical and we're trying to save your life. We don't know what the issue is, but you're bleeding internally and your blood pressure is dropping and you just got to stay with us. And I was going, wow, is this it? Am I going to die? This I'm not ready for this yet. Yeah. And that kind of informed the whole issue around feeling comfortable in my own skin. So, so that one of my values is really about being really comfortable in my own skin from a health point of view and a connection point of view. I can go into that if you really wanted me to, but there's a number of things that
Yeah,
are there.
we'll definitely circle back to it.
Okay.
Keen to hear that. Thank
Uh,
you.
the third one, again, not in any order, was a super connected family, and I've got a blended family. I have a stepson, four daughters, two from a previous marriage, and two from my marriage today. So it's quite a blended family, and I've worked really hard to make sure that we remain connected. It's not, I don't want to just have kids. I want to experience my kids. Some of them live outside of the city I'm in, and I have to work pretty hard to do that. And I get a lot of joy. I get a lot of joy when we come together. So that's another one. So I'm always looking for ways that we can experience each other in different ways, whether we do a course together, whether we just come together for a weekend or those sorts of things. Um, the fourth one is about learning and sharing. This is a big one for me. I love learning, but that's not enough. That's only part of the equation. The second part of it is sharing. I feel like once I've learned something, it's beholden on me to distribute that in a way which makes sense to others, and hence I find myself in a role which is to do with coaching and teaching and facilitating and speaking, because that allows that value to happen. And the fifth one is really collecting adventures. And I think that's about looking at life as an adventure and looking at every experience as an adventure. So collecting adventures, not things, is what I talk about. It's much more fun having adventures because they stay with you for a long time. Things
And
tarnish after a while.
you say that very differently to collecting memories. A lot of
Yep.
people talk about collecting memories rather than collecting things. So they'll go, no, I'm going to go holiday. I'm going to go travel so I can collect memories because memories last forever. You just very specifically called that adventures, not even
Yeah.
experiences, just adventures itself.
Adventures is how I look at it. Just that means I want to do something different every day. That means there's so much more ahead of me in life that is unknown. Memories could be a family getting together and creating memories. Adventures is going something and trying something completely new. Something that makes you uncomfortable, something that puts you in a place where you go, um, and it just keeps you looking for some unique experience out there.
Is that
We
what adventure is? There's always a unique experience.
Yeah, something different. It's something different. It could be, it could be walking across the Himalayas or Himalayas, as we say, or it could be as simple as a road trip from Sydney to Brisbane. And what we choose to do along the way is not stay on the highway, but take the side roads and go and see obscure and crazy things that we probably never would. So it's those sorts of things.
How do you apply that into your everyday life?
Sure. If you think about going to the shopping center or going grocery shopping as an adventure, it changes your entire frame of what that experience is.
Yeah.
You go there not just to get in and get out as fast as you can, but you go there to talk to people, to listen, to engage in conversations. And not everybody wants to do that, but you usually find that if you have that frame of glasses on, I'm going for an adventure up to the shops, it changes the whole experience. It makes it a lot more interesting. Or even, yeah, simple things like going for a walk with a friend as an adventure, because we're going to go and explore conversations and have conversations that we possibly never have had before. And it becomes something I look forward to in a very different way than just doing the task.
Hearing you basically say parent yourself, because that's the way you talk to a 3-year-old, right? It's like, oh, this is going to be so much fun, we're going to go to the shops, or at least this would be the ideal way that you talk to your 3-year-old, right? Or we're going to go for a walk down to the playground, isn't this going to be exciting? As opposed to, come on, we got to go to the shops and we got to go get our groceries and whatever so we can get home and so we can cook, so we can eat, and then we can go to
Yeah.
sleep. And then
Yeah.
as opposed to, this is all an adventure, this is all fun.
Yes. Yeah. Kathy, my wife, always laughs because I always say, "Come on, let's go have an adventure." She goes, "What are we doing?" I said, "We're going to go and get some. We're going to go and get some. We're going to create something for dinner, and let's go and find something different and unusual." And she laughs at it, so because she looks at every little thing as an adventure, but I think she gets it, and and we often talk about let's have a new adventure today, and that's every day. It doesn't have to be climbing the Himalayas.
Okay, so we're gonna dive right back to your mindset soon and your values and how you live. But I think that as we start to explore your journey, I think what you've already shared is gonna show itself pretty strongly throughout it. And so I think this would be a really valuable exercise to do, is that as we go through your journey and as you're sharing, that you also maybe share, if you're up for the challenge, is also maybe share the values that you were striving towards, or the values that are really important to you, but that you were pushing down
Hmm.
throughout that journey.
Hmm.
Okay, so you
Sure.
shared that you were born in India, you moved to Australia when you were 12. Um, was did the first 12 years of your life have much of an impact on you today?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and this is probably another angle on values is your belief systems that you call on. So I grew up in Calcutta, a very privileged life, middle class life in Calcutta. Um, and went to boarding school from the age of 7 up in the Himalayas. That's why I have this affinity for the mountains. And, when we went to boarding school in the Himalayas, we were there for 9 months of the year and then back in Calcutta, which was 500 miles away, for 3 months. So we kind of, if you can imagine a 7-year-old being sent away to a boarding school up in the
Up in the
mountains,
mountains,
was,
yeah.
yeah, was out there. In those days, it was accepted as the right thing to do because in education, you did what you had to, or my parents did what they had to get me educated. But that absolutely formed some of the things, the whole sense of resilience, adventure, being comfortable with the unknown happened from the age of 7 for me because I left the comfort of my family home and found myself left to my own devices and my own wits to try and survive as a young boy up in the mountains. I ended up loving that experience. It was a significant part of my life. And to this day, I often reflect back on some of the things that I picked up from the early days of school. That's the positive side. It taught me a lot of resilience, of perseverance, of just getting through, having to be accountable and owning it. Those are the sorts of things that you kind of uh, traits that you pick up along the way. But then also there's some things that I needed to reprogram in myself. So growing up in India, it's a very stratified system. There are many classes. I'm talking classes as opposed to caste. There are castes there as well, and you kind of get used to it. But the thing about and your parents and teachers plant into you a whole lot of beliefs. Uh, you know things like study hard, do well at school, go to university, get a great job, find a nice um, partner, wife, in my case, uh, buy a lovely home, have kids, be successful in your job, retire, and then you've earned the right to have a good time. That was kind of the trajectory that was given to me, and what a lot of rubbish. Who says that is because every time one of those things doesn't happen, you feel like a failure. My first marriage failed, and I felt like a failure because I had this belief that was in me. And the thing about beliefs, Harry, is, and I'm sure anyone listening to this would also understand, it's unconscious, it's planted in you. It doesn't quite, you're not quite conscious of the beliefs that you have until later in life when you start questioning why, who says that success is based on those things? Who says that it's got to be this? And then I find myself having to really interrogate my belief systems and try and figure out what were the healthy ones. The issue with beliefs is they're actually planted into you by teachers and parents and relatives at an age where you can't negotiate it. At 7, I can't negotiate those. I don't have the wherewithal to say, not sure that's a good one. I'm not sure what you're telling me is the truth, right? You don't. You just go, okay, if that's what you mean, I've got to do, that's what I'm going to do. And unfortunately, we do that. And in parenting, as you talked about before, one of the things I'm really conscious of is not planting my belief systems onto my kids, talking about them, allowing them the freedom to say, well, is this right or is this wrong? To have the chance to negotiate with me what they think is right and wrong, and to have the conversation and the debate. I love that about being a parent, because I've learned that that didn't happen to me. It was basically, this is the way and this is how you need to be successful. So yeah, that's some of the beliefs, and I'm not sure how we got there, but and maybe I've gone off
Now,
on a tangent.
just on that slight tangent, uh, a father that I really look up to, his name is Michael Ray. He ended up becoming a solo dad when he was 51 years old, I think, with a 2-year-old daughter. His wife decided to kind of just exit the picture. And he's done incredible work over the last 10, 12 years, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main messages he shares is that his parenting needs to be questionable.
Mm.
He always tells his daughter that. Question my parenting style. Question if I'm doing this right.
Well, here's something that I do, and I love that. I love that question,
Oh.
and I say to my kids, "Give me some feedback. How am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
How do you rate me in my fathering?" Or, and this is the other thing I say is fathering is what we learn, or what we're told to do, but dad is being a dad is a different. It's a different, again, it's a different frame that you look through. And I only learned to be a dad later in life. I was a father who was always about providing, giving them the things they needed to do what they had to do, making sure that they were safe. But being a dad, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit, and being goofy, it's having fun, it's being playful, about enjoying the time you spend with them in many ways. It's having common interests, it's getting on your knees and playing with them. And I think that's kind of the other side of it that I've learned, and often say to them, how am I doing? I mean, what's the rating you give me out of 10? And I don't always get, sometimes I get a 5 out of 10 or a 6, and I go, oh, what happened? And then they will share that with me. But I love that concept of parenting being questionable. I love it. I love it.
We'll definitely circle back to parenting as well. There are going to be a lot of loose ends to tie up. But let's go back to your journey. Okay, so the first 12 years of your life, amazing that you didn't even spend that much time with your family if you were away 500 miles away for 9 months of the
Yep.
year.
Yep.
And it was probably still boarding school back in Calcutta as well, I'm guessing.
Well, it was. We came back to Calcutta and immigrated. So I would have stayed at boarding school all the way through, but we immigrated to Australia
Okay.
and Sydney. And when I got to Sydney, I didn't go to boarding school anymore.
Mm.
It was just a day school, if you like.
Yep.
But it was a big shock for me at a time when if you think about being 12, everything is up for grabs. You're trying to figure out who you are, as your hormones are going absolutely nuts. You're trying to identify who you are. And I came from this life which was very privileged because, my dad had a great job. We were financially pretty secure. And, in a stratified society, we were somewhere close to the top, if you like. We come to Australia and I show up in a school, and all of a sudden, my brown skin, I'm made to feel like I'm somewhere down the bottom, that I don't belong. I should go back to where I came from. I can't speak very well. I'm not, so the sorts of things that would endear me to my classmates were missing. I had a very thick accent, which everybody laughed at every time I spoke. So those are the sorts of things that absolutely messed me up, because at 12, 13, 14, I remember, you want to have a girlfriend, you want to be interested in girls. And I remember going to a school dance, and as we used to, we'd have another school, and our school, we were supposed to go up and ask the girl to dance. And I went up and I asked this girl if she'd like to dance with me. And she just said, yuck. And I ran away and outside and cried. I literally cried because I just felt so, so terrible about myself and angry about, why am I in this brown skin? Why can't I be a surfy dude, like, with blonde hair and blue eyes and be the cool kid? Why do I have to carry the stigma through my life? And I really was pretty messed up growing up. And hence, the mask started to appear, right? I started putting on these little things to be accepted and survive and have a girlfriend and
What
all
was
those
some
sorts of
what
things.
was some of those things?
Well, first of all, being a people pleaser, that was a really key thing. Do anything for people and always do more for people. The second thing I realized is I'm a pretty good listener. I'm not, when I was 16, 17, 18, I wouldn't say I was a good looking kid that, girls would walk past and say, I want to date Andre. But I did recognize that if people talked to me, I'd listen and paid attention to them. And I think that had a huge impact later in life because I think to this day, I'm still a good listener and I still pay attention to people. And I still, I think paying attention is a superpower in this world we live in. It's such a distracted world. If we can pay attention to someone and really listen and be curious, you're there. And I think that I learned that as my way of succeeding. And I find myself drawn into careers that were advisory, where I had to listen and not get up and speak and express my point of view at the early stages of my life. So yeah, those were some of the things that happened, Harry, when I came to Australia and kind of started to shape me. And I think I'm not alone. Every person listening to this would have gone through a series of experiences that, and I'm sure you did too, Harry,
Sure.
that have kind of shaped you. It's life that gives you that.
Yeah, and then along that path. So for those listening to this, I've just heard so many people when I've shared this type of concept with them or explored this concept with them, they start getting to more of a defeatist type of view, right? It's like, oh well, I've just had a shitty life, so therefore I should just have a shitty life. And I mean, the reason why I'm sharing stories from people such as yourself and from mentors such as yourself is so that people can start to adopt what they're hearing in this conversation and in this dialogue into their own life. And now what you're hearing here, if you're listening to this, what you're hearing right now is now part of your life experience. You can use this to change the way that you're living your life and to change the way that you show up.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah, you do. I think you have some choices, and I often use this, particularly when I'm talking to my clients or my kids. It doesn't matter. When you sit down and you kind of look at what life has thrown you, and there's so many cliches about that. I don't want to go down that about lemons and lemonade and stuff like that. But you really have three choices as to how you respond to the adversities that come your way. The first one is to play the victim card, which is, as you said, life is shitty and look what it's given me. And, I look at everybody else and look how lucky they are. And, I missed out on the lucky streak and stuff like that. And you get some benefit by being a victim, right? People pay attention to you, you get sympathy and stuff like that. So people get drawn to that. And it's very unhealthy. It's incredibly unhealthy because you start seeing that as your identity and you feel totally helpless. There's nothing I can do. The second one is being a survivor, which is keep your head down, don't do too much, and just get by, just do the minimum you have to do, and you'll be okay. And I think the one that I choose, and anybody else who's listening, and it is a choice. It is a choice. Don't think it isn't a choice. Is to be a navigator. And the navigator is saying, well, yeah, look, I've got some pretty shitty things happen in my life. I look at my life and, there's a gazillion adversities that have hit me. But if I choose to be a navigator, I can use that. I can use that to do better and to feel good about my identity of who I am as opposed to that. So yeah. So I think those are choices that people have.
Yeah, okay. So we got to when you're about 17 and you still felt like you didn't belong at all. You were putting on masks, you were trying to fit in, but it sounds like it was still very strained and you weren't enjoying yourself.
I
Perhaps,
was. I wasn't. Go ahead. Let
sorry,
me answer. I did.
it sounds like you shifted from around 12, 13, 14 in victim to uh, 15, 16, 17 survivor.
Yeah.
And so then what happened from there? Like what was next?
Well, then navigate my way out of it, right? If you want to use that metaphor, survivor, victim, and
When
navigator.
did you start navigating though?
I think I started navigating after I finished school.
Okay.
When I bombed my HSC, so I did my HSC. I got it, and I did just about okay, but I didn't get to the big universities that my parents expected me. Again, the belief systems that they had, get to be a doctor or a lawyer, didn't happen, and I felt failed. I felt like a failure, but I decided, whatever reason, it what was what it was. So a couple of things happened. I decided that if I had to really be successful in life, I want to be successful as a person, as a 17-year-old. Being Having a girlfriend was really important, right? Because that was a kind of social thing that everybody looked around at you. So I decided I'd play guitar. I started learning guitar because I figured if I could play in a band, I'd be really cool because everyone I knew who played in the band had adoring fans. And this is in the 70s where, there were a lot of bands around, a lot of live music. So I picked up a guitar and I did play a lot, and I did join a band, and I had the best time ever. And I think that was a turning point for me. All of a sudden, it was the realization that success wasn't about becoming a doctor or a lawyer. It was about actually, and I don't know, I had that. I'm looking back and joining the dots now, but at that stage, it was like, this is pretty good. I can get up and play a guitar in a band. We played, some Led Zeppelin songs and some Deep Purple songs, and people are dancing. And, it's like, yeah, this is pretty good. But then my belief systems kicked in and said, "Oh, Andre, no, you got to get serious. You're never going to make any money." And my parents were looking at me going, yeah, you're not that good a guitarist, Andre. I don't think you're going to make a killing. Maybe you should go back to university." And I did. And I went to uni and I did my business studies. And I thought, well, what's in front of me? IT, nah, didn't interest me. Accounting didn't interest me. So it was a combination of either marketing or HR. And I figured, well, this HR stuff seems pretty interesting. And I'm a good listener. I do listen to people. And I went to a careers advisor and they said, yeah, I think the HR thing it's an emerging thing and it could be something that you should do. And I did. So I got my qualifications, my degree in HR, and that became my trajectory for many years. And then with that came success, corporate success. And I put on a career mask, right? All of a sudden it was flying business class, going into the lounge, all of those sorts of stupid things that people carry on about, became really important to me, and all of those trimmings. And I got married at that stage, so I ended up getting married my first wife, and we had some kids. But I was so caught up, like I was at that stage looking after. I was head of learning I'd moved out of HR into learning for the region. So I had an Asia Pacific responsibility, and I was flying every 2 weeks to, Singapore, Hong Kong, or KL, or Manila, or Beijing. And it was fantastic. I just got because all of a sudden my self-worth started to go, and I was doing really well. Great career, loved it. And it cost me my first marriage, right? My marriage, actually, as I say, my marriage became an inconvenient truth. It wasn't really giving me the kicks that I was getting out of my career. And that was my fault, and I own it. Absolutely own it. And I should have spent and invested more, but I didn't.
Are you happy to
And
explain more about what you mean by the marriage kind of wasn't feeding your identity and what you actually wanted? Like, what was that look like? Because, and sorry, the context behind asking this question is so many people in relationships today have such challenges with their relationship. They don't speak about it. They don't open up about it. They don't talk about it. Maybe they talk with some close friends about it, but then it's always biased in the context of that conversation as
mm,
well.
mm,
How did your corporate role and corporate success cost your marriage?
yeah. Well, I think the first for start, the marriage was probably had some flaws in it, by the way, so it wasn't ideal in many ways, and I found it quite antagonistic. That I was always told how terrible I was as not terrible, but not good enough as a husband, not good enough as a parent. And what I got told at work is, "You're amazing, Andre. Look, you've been promoted." So I was the youngest HR director in the IT company I was with. I was an HR director by the time I was 28. right? In those days, that's like, whew,
Yeah.
that's a big. I was in a high potential program, and everyone around me at work was telling me, "You are amazing, Andre." And I come home, and my wife would say, "Yeah, not really. Yeah, go and do the washing up, go and do the dishes." So I found that I was gravitating towards the things that gave me that made my self-worth increase. Remembering I came from a place where my self-worth was a train wreck, right? And growing up. So I grabbed and gravitated towards these things, and the trimmings became really important. Flying business class from here to London or to LA was like, yeah, that's pretty good. Staying at the Hyatt or a 7-star hotel somewhere was pretty cool, and did all of those things that helped me feel good about me. Yeah, helped me feel good about me. So the marriage became really coming home from a trip where I got lots of accolades, walking back into the house, and even though I love my kids, it just became really challenging. So consequently, my wife as well, we sort of went on this trajectory at that stage, and she told me, "Had enough. Don't want to be around anymore." And yeah, she called it. She called it and said, "I'm done. Go and find a place to live." And that was the start. So my two daughters, at the time, my stepson was 13, and my two daughters were 6 and 8, very very young. And
Was there relief in some of that for you as well? And
there was relief because I got away from the pain,
mm,
and then I didn't realize, but it also created massive pain for me because I didn't realize how much not being home with my children meant to me. I thought, get away from the pain, and life will be great, and we can do all these sorts of things. But not being able to sit down and read them a bedtime story or tell them a story, which I love doing, just created this huge hole in my heart, right? A massive, massive, massive hole. And I think it probably led to my first heart attack at 42, Harry. So I was 42 when almost my first heart attack. The second one happened 15 years later, but at 42, hmm. And that was a second, if you like, turning point in my life. Was yeah. So that was it, and I decided to quit corporate life not long after that. I was very successful. So I went from HR into running a consulting company, ended up being MD of the consulting company, which was again lots of accolades. I was really successful corporate career, right? I just loved it. It was like my brilliant career. Fell in love with my career. So, but my second marriage was brilliant. It was everything I I needed and everything I wanted from a partner. And that was Kathy, my wife today, and we ended up having two more kids, and then we took a leap of faith when I decided that I didn't. My first value I talked about autonomy. I don't no longer want to work for a boss. I want to work for me. So at the age of 50, I decided we'd go up and start up a business in India. Futura Kathy is Australian. Had never lived outside of Australia.
in Indian
Our
background
kids,
or Australian background?
no, Australian,
Yeah.
Australian background. Had never lived outside of Australia. Went there, and we had the adventure of a lifetime. We took our two youngest daughters with us at the time, and we went there to set up a business, which is Forum India, which we did. Stayed there for 4 years, and I still am involved with the business. So I set up a team, and we came back after 4 years, but we keep going back every year. We haven't since the pandemic, but we keep going back every year. And but forget the business side of it. This is the biggest thing about going back to India, was a huge shift in my identity of who I was. Massive shift. I I decided it probably, and it's now looking back, it wasn't at the time. I talked at the start of fitting in, and there were many times, even though I feel like I belong in Sydney, Australia, there are many times where I feel like I'm fitting in. Because someone says something or something's done, and you kind of go, oh, it's a little bit on the nose, even to this day, um, now and then, not as much as when I first got here. But when I went to India, I realized, hey, I don't feel like I'm fitting in here anymore. I kind of feel like I belong in this country. And I embraced my brownness, if you like. I embraced the brown in me. Whereas for a long time, I kind of dissed the brown in me. People used to call me words like coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside. And those sorts of derogatory phrases that people would laugh and joke and talk to me about. Well, I think when I went back to India, and this is in 2008, to set up this business, I fell in love with the country, and I fell in love with my Indianness, if you like, all over again. And that was a huge shift uh, in me personally. And coming back over here, it has certainly settled me a lot more, and I no longer have that internal struggle. That internal struggle about who I am is gone. I'm much more embracing of it.
Is that because in your interactions here, or in your action, I'm not even here, I'm in Singapore right now, but in your interactions back in Australia, you started to just not pretend that you weren't brown? Like, is that it?
Yes.
Like you
Yeah.
just instead of like, no, 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 I'm white. Don't worry, I'm white. And the other person's like, I can see you're brown, but okay, you're pretending you're white. I just won't pretend whatever. You just kind of like, how did you handle the derogatory comments? Uh,
Oh, it cut really deeply, and the way we learn to handle it is through humor, right? We laugh it off, and someone says, "Hey, coconut," and you go, "Yay, coconut," and you make a dance about it, and that's the way we used to. I used to. That was my strategy to deal with it.
how do you do it now?
Or someone, I inappropriate, don't like it, I call it,
Mm.
and people used to talk to me and shake their heads, and the Indian accent, everyone laughs at an Indian accent. It's just funny when people try to speak English, and they would do that with me, and I would laugh back at them. And I go, it's not funny actually. you know uh, and that's fine, and I do that, and it doesn't whereas I wouldn't before. And I think that's the comfort, that's being comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah. No, there are definitely times I wish that I'd handled it differently. I was and for myself, so Jewish background, or I am Jewish, and uh, I'd often get like just strange comments from various people, especially when I was in the corporate environment. I was high net worth financial advice and Westpac Premium, and dealing with high net worth clients and private clients, and there'd just be occasional clients who just start saying something like as a compliment, but it doesn't like if you're saying something racist or derogatory, it's never a compliment. It's like, oh, I'm glad a Jew's looking after my money. I'm like, who would say that? Like, why would you say that? Or it's like, oh, or like I'm talking about, yeah, we'll save some money for you by shifting you over across this platform. It's like, oh yeah, that's good. That's a Jewish thing to save money. Like, why would you even say it? And at the time, I kind of just I was young. I was 26, 27, whatever it was, and I kind of just ignored it. I was happy that I was taking that money, and I didn't invest much into maintaining the relationship moving forward. But this approach of laughing about it, laughing and calling it out, is quite a unique one. Do you have
Mm.
more tips for people who are facing those types of challenges, regardless of what color their skin is or what their
Yeah,
background is?
I think the laughing it out is not a great strategy.
Mm,
It's a self protection one, and it's about fitting in. uh, when you walk into a pub and someone would not do that, and start saying hello in an Indian accent, you kind of go, hey, yeah, it's really funny. Get better at it. It's not that good,
right.
or do something like that. And I think that, but underneath it, you're going, man, you are the biggest jerk. If it was okay, I would probably want to smack you, but I wouldn't. But you kind of feel these things building up inside of you. But what comes out is not what's going on in here. What comes out is a laugh, or yeah, yeah, or you ignore it. And I think being able to say, "Hey, man, that's just not appropriate," in a public way.
Yeah.
I hear you. It may be funny to some of the people, but it hurts. It's not appropriate. Just want to let you know next time. And I think that's the courageous thing to do, and I do it. And it takes a little bit of, and sometimes you get a little bit of pushback and go, oh, look at this guy, he's a bit too sensitive and stuff like that. But I think most people go, oh, sorry, didn't mean it.
Mm.
I've learned. Thanks for letting me know, because I didn't know I was upsetting you. I didn't realize it had hurt you. And I think for me, that's the courageous place to deal with it. But it takes a little bit of, a little bit of guts
I,
to call someone out.
I think it takes more than just that guts. I think what you were just sharing before is it takes a sense of confidence in who you are.
Yeah.
Like the shift for me in terms of not caring about if people say that, literally, I just don't give a shit if they say it or not. It's
Mm,
like, you want to talk down to me because of something. Okay, that's fine. It says more about you than it says about me. And
mm,
the ability to just either choose to ignore it or choose to respond to it in an appropriate way or choose to go along with it is entirely up to you when you
mm,
get to choose, right? And
mm-hmm,
I'm really, really want to labor this point for the people who are listening. Like you went back to India, you embraced you referred to it as your brownness, but you embraced more of who you are, as in loving yourself for who you are or accepting yourself for who you are rather than judging yourself for it. And
mm-hmm.
then you had this completely different experience of life as a result when you came back.
Massive, massive shift in identity. I think the biggest thing in terms of revealing who you are is connecting with yourself. You sort of come back home to you. I came back home to me.
Mm.
I kind of left for a little while, and I played in this place, but I didn't come back home to me. And I think that sense of coming back home to me, that authenticity, ripping off those masks and saying, this is who I am, and I'm not going to be a people pleaser. I still am pretty much a nice a nice bloke, but certainly not the people pleaser that I used to be.
Mm.
In fact, Kathy, my wife, says, "You're not the person I married. You were such a nice person, and I married you. Now you're like really pushing buttons and confronting people and calling things out and stuff like that." And I go, "Yeah, that's probably because that's the authentic me, really, as opposed to looking for some sort of external validation, because that's what a people pleaser is: external validation, external, not internal.
Yeah, I mean, you
So
don't strike me as a pushover. Like I'm guessing that you could still get along with most people. You could still you're probably quite charismatic in most circumstances, and you're able to kind of lure people in and engage them and influence them and all that kind of stuff. That's the gauge that I'm getting from you. But I'm guessing that you're not willing to be pushed over.
no, no.
Would
And I think that comes with a strong. You're right. You're right. So right, Harry. I'd never thought about it before until you mentioned it. It's because your identity is rock solid. You also, you know what you stand for, and that's part of the value stuff we started talking about. If you know what's important to you, then my dad said to me once, if you don't know what you stand for, you fall for anything.
yes.
Right? And if you know what you stand for, that's that, as you mentioned, that identity piece is so important. That's what stops you from being a pushover. Grab onto that. And anyone listening over here is connect with yourself. That was the thing I had to do. I had to learn how to build a new relationship with André Alphonso, right? Because it wasn't that good.
So this is fascinating. Not where I expected the conversation to go at all. But there's like this whole big shift in society. It seems like there's this big push, especially by men trying to go. There's too much feminism. There's too much which is happening there. Men are starting to push back and starting to reclaim their masculinity, and it's being done in by some healthily and by many people very unhealthily. Like it's just going down the wrong path. It's saying never get trapped by a woman,
Mm,
never don't accept the conditions of marriage that exist today. Uh, don't let anyone influence your life, and just kind of be top dog, be number one, like all that kind of stuff. And I I suspect that they're just trying to get to the same outcome of just being comfortable with who they are and being
mm.
able to assert themselves and not be a pushover.
Yeah. I think I'm part of a group called the Men's Table. It's a men's support group, men supporting men. And one of our catch cries is healthy masculinity,
Right.
and understanding what healthy masculinity is all about. Because you're right, Harry, and I'm sure you growing up in Australia, uh, in the Western world, and probably right across the world, actually, boys don't cry, men have got to be tough, and all of those sorts of things. We shut down, the feminine in us, as Carl Jung said, everyone has a bit of both. The male in us makes us decisive and helps us take risk and be analytical and stuff like that, which is really good. And you can't throw that away. But what we do throw away is the empathy and listening and support, which is also part of our makeup and psyche, but we're taught to downplay those. So in the men's table that we get together, it's men supporting men. It's all about connecting with the people and allowing people to express their emotions, not fixing, listening, and we're learning how to engage with other men. And it's fantastic the impact that has had, because a lot of the people that come together in this organization come from a pretty toxic masculinity background, and they're looking at something which is truer to who they are. There are going to be people who are out there going this, that, and everything else, and unfortunately, life has maybe dealt them certain blows where they have this anger towards women, and we are seeing so much of that now played out in social media and in media. And it's a bit scary. You got, I'm not going to mention names, but the person who
There are
is
a few
out
of them,
there.
I think.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah.
Look, I mean, yeah, look, it's much healthier to do that rather than blaming women for, blaming feminism for the fact that women are allowed to refuse sex and marriage. I mean, okay, that's not the way to go forward, is by taking away other people's rights in order to feel more assertive. But how? I mean, maybe you've pondered this question before, but if you went back to the time in your first marriage and you had your current mindset today, so not so much the experiences that you've had, but you have your mindset, your psyche today, your self-confidence, your authenticity, and you're in that first marriage, would the first marriage have worked?
It may have. I don't know the answer to that, and it'd be hard to say. But I think I would have handled it a lot differently, for sure. And it may not have. It may have ended up at the same place. Uh, but I think I would have shown up a lot differently. I would have been a little bit more understanding, listening, empathetic. Uh, all of those sorts of things that I've kind of learned now than being judgmental and angry and defensive. These are skills I've learned, I guess, later in life to deal with that. I probably would have dealt with it in a more healthier, constructive way. But that's me. At the end of the day, my ex-wife has also got to own it. And, if she falls out or fell out of love with me, that's being authentic, and she wants to go and do something else and find it somewhere else. That's all right. I can only kind of just go with what I did. And I think to answer your question, I would have definitely managed it in a more constructive way than what I did.
Have you managed to heal the damage to your relationship with your kids from back then?
Yeah, actually went and apologized to the three of them. My stepson, who has an amazing relationship with me right now. He's based in Melbourne, and he went through a really rough time after we split up and ended up going down some really dark places. Um, his biological father died not long after we separated, and
Right.
that even accelerated that whole process. He's great now. He's come back and he's amazing. He's an amazing human being. But I did go and tell him I was sorry for any part I played in pushing him off the rails. And my two other daughters, who are now in their 30s, uh, same thing. I went and apologized because there was anger. There was definitely anger towards me, and I felt that I needed to, probably for me, to just own the fact that I was accountable in some degree to their pain, because it was very painful for my two daughters and my stepson to go through all of that. And I had to own the fact that I put them there to some degree, right? And so I did. And I think that has been a turning point. And this happened probably about 8, 9 years ago now, but it's been a turning point in terms of my relationship with them. I think we have an amazing um, father-son relationship with all of them. And we have a blended family with my two other daughters, and we're all really close, all five of us and my wife. So there's, it's taken a bit of work, but we are really close. And hence one of my values is being super connected as a family is really important for me. I feel like I love it. I want more of them. I want to experience my relationship with them. I just don't want to I don't want to know that we've got a great relationship. I want to experience it. I want to sit down, have some fun, watch a movie together, listen to some music, go to a concert, dance, have a drink, cook some great food together, have them come over. So that's the connection that I really strive for. I really want that, and that's become a really key part of one of my values. So yes,
Right. So having kids is not a status symbol to you. They're not a thing that you've collected. They're something to actually experience, or the
yes,
relationship with them is something to experience.
yes,
Okay. So you went through this journey. You were doing exceptionally well in corporate. You eventually decided you found an amazing, another, like your second wife, and the marriage was amazing, and you're both really supportive towards each other. And you were adjusting and you were growing, and you eventually got to the point where you're sick of this. I can't keep doing corporate stuff. Let's go to India for 4 years and set something up there. And then came back 4 years later. And what happened then? What was the next shift?
we wanted our two daughters to finish school in Australia, so they started high school and they were going through school over there. It's a very different schooling system. They all got pros and cons, but we wanted them to fall into the Australian schooling system, university kind of thing. So we'd always planned to come back for them to do their final couple of years in high school. So they did a bit of their high school in India, but they finished their high school here, and that was the main reason for coming back. Um, and family, my other daughters were here, my son was here, so we wanted to be in proximity with them. So those were the reasons for coming back. But we kept the business in India and kept going back twice, 3 times a year to experience that, which was so freaking good. Going back there, So yeah, that's kind of why we came back to answer your question.
Okay. And then what? What do you do then?
We came back over here trying to figure out what I do with my life. And while I was in India, so Forum, the business so I was the managing director for Forum in Australia. I went to my boss, who was the president of the company. It's a Forum here was a global management consulting company. And we had looked at a strategy of going into India, and I'd written a strategy document. But this is 2008 when, the GFC was just starting to emerge, and the company said, we're not going to invest any money in India. And I kind of thought to myself, here's the opportunity. I'm going to do it. I'm going to, remortgage our house, which was paid off, and let's go up and start a business in India. Because it just seems the right thing to do. That was a leap of faith. That was a massive leap of faith, but it just seemed absolutely right. And my wife, we'd actually been on a holiday a year before, just for a couple of weeks. Said to me on the way back the year before, is that I could live here. There's something about this which is magical. So when the opportunity came up, I'll remember the date. I was going out for a walk in the morning, and I had a career conversation coming up with my boss on the phone. It was morning, their evening in Boston, and I was sort of thinking, the options that were in front of me was go to Singapore and run the region, go to the US and run a region. And I thought, it didn't quite. And then all of a sudden, this idea emerged from nowhere. It wasn't even something. And the idea was, well, why don't I set up India out of my own coin, my own investment, and we'll set it up as a distributor, use the brand Forum, but it will be my business and I will own it. And I came home and Kathy was asleep. And I went and got on the conference call. I went up and I spoke to my boss, and he said, well, what have we thought, Singapore or the US? And I said, neither. I said, how about I do this? How about I go to India, set it up? I'd already had a replacement for me here in Australia to take over from my role because we had our succession planning. So I said to him, why don't I go set up the business in India because you've always wanted to be there, and we'll set up as a distributor. And he said, wow, where'd that come from? I said, I don't know. He said, that's a great idea. And by the end of the day, give me a 1-page strategy on what you want to do. And I said, first thing I go to do is go and ask my wife. And he goes, haven't you asked? I said, no, literally the idea just came up. So I walked back in to the house. Kathy was having a coffee, and I said, hey, I just had a meeting with Ed, my CEO, and I put the point to him about us going to India and setting up a business and living there, and we would invest and be our business. What do you reckon? And she looked at me, and within 30 seconds, she said, yes. 30 seconds, boom. And it was one of those moments that I look back and I still get a shiver up my spine because it happened so naturally and so quick. And we were there in a few months. No business, hanging up our shingle, trying to get business to come in the door, trying to get a team together, struggling to make ends meet. But it was the best time. And our kids were in school, and English school, English speaking school, international school, I should say. And 4 years, the best, most magical experience I've had. For me, it was very different. It was all about identity and feeling like I returned to the country of my birth and I fitted in. For Kathy, it was a discovery of, spirituality, yoga and mindfulness and meditation that she ended up going into ashrams and stuff like that. For the kids, they made long-lasting friendships in India, which they still have to this day. They were just not, at that time they were, I think, 8 and 10 when we went there, and they still have those. And it was great. And we went and saw the world from there. We went to Bhutan and, Bangladesh and Turkey and China and all sorts of places, as well as all over India. And we galvanized as a unit, as a family. My daughters came as well and visited us for some time, my elder daughters. So it was fantastic. And that's why to this day, when we came back here, we decided that we would keep the business and go back every 4 months or so, because we enjoyed that so much. It was so different. It was such a different mindset shift. It was all about, you see the massive differences, as you no doubt, Harry, I'm sure you would have experienced, the massive differences that exist between the wealthy and the poor. When the thinking, the good and the bad of the country, and being able to navigate it and experience it,
It's
changed our
probably
lives.
it's probably one of the most extreme poverty gaps in the world, in India, right? Like
Yep.
I'm in Singapore, and I see people with maids who get paid very little compared to what most people here would be getting paid, and most people here get paid very little compared to those who are very wealthy. And then of course you've got expats who live here as well. It's very unnatural coming from Australia, right? It just doesn't seem right. But India
Yep.
would just be more extreme, especially with caste system as well, right?
Yeah. So what happened then is, because Forum became really successful, I got approached by some of these other consulting companies in the US saying, "Hey, Andre, we heard that. Would you be interested in distributing for us?" And there were a couple of organizations that I aligned myself with. One was Ariel, and they do. So I'm still the director of Ariel in Australia now. So when I came back to Australia, they asked me if I would set up Australia for them, and my business partner, who used to be with me at Forum, and we set up Ariel here. And Ariel is all about using actors to teach communication skills. So we have a group of facilitators that work with us that go out there. They all come from a theater background. You can use arguably the profession with the best communication skills are actors. What they learn, and these are professional actors, not self-taught, but people, what they learn in acting school about voice and body, and finding the emotion within yourself and all those sorts of things, we teach into business,
Right.
right? And that's kind of that was the shift away from Forum to doing that over here, and loved it, loved that whole idea because it was so unusual and different. And I learned a lot personally
I was,
because I had to go through it.
I was going to ask. So now that you've ever since you became a director of them, how has your communication style changed? How has your leadership style changed? How do you interact with others differently?
Yeah, massively, massively. So I used to be this person. that everyone would say was, if I spoke or if I was meeting with you one on one or in a small group, I was kind of very level. There wasn't much highs and lows. It was calm. Everyone said, Andre, when I'm with you, it's this calmness that we get. And when I went to Ariel, and the first time before we decided to go with them and actually do the business here, we wanted to experience it. And the facilitator took us through. I was with the group, and she said, Andre, what's your desire in terms of presence? And I said, one of the things that everyone says is I'm very calm, but in my head there's a volcano going off. I mean, there is passion and anger and love and all of these things. I actually struggle to show any of it out there. So she said, okay, let's work on that. And over the course of the workshop, we had all of these little monologues we'd have to get up and practice. And she said, okay, Andre, you want to see the volcano? So I got up, and it was a monologue from The Odd Couple, which was a TV show, movie that used to be around in the 70s and 80s, I guess. And I thought, okay, I'm going to show the volcano. And I got up and I did the 3-minute monologue. And then she looked around the room and she said, okay, Andre, how much of the volcano do you think we saw? And I kind of thought, well, I reckon it was 10 out of 10, but I'm going to just write down 8. And she went around the room, and to all the other participants, there was about 8 of us. And people said, oh, we saw about 1 or 2. And I'm going, are you kidding me? Are you seriously kidding me? And so she said, okay, Andre, we're going to do it again. We want to see if you can get it up from an average of 2 to at least a 5. And she showed me some things. She showed me some tips from acting school about pause, about speed and volume and energy. And I did it 5 times, Harry, 5 times. I was an emotional wreck by the time I finished in front of peers. But I got it up to about a 7 for everybody else. For me, it was like a 30 out of 10. But for everybody, it was a 7. But it wasn't actually. It was actually a 7 out of 10 for me, because what I learned was it's not just about exploding. It's about control. And it's about using all of the things around you, like voice and story, to do it. Most liberating experience as a skill. I came out of that feeling like I could explode, I could whisper, I could tell an amazing story to to keep people over there, which I'd never really done before. Before in the past was like, yeah, monotone, no movement, statuesque. So yeah, it was amazing. And so as a leader, it showed me how to show up differently to people. How, people, the biggest thing was to conquer my fear of overexpression. I always thought that expressing myself was an act of indulgence, self-indulgence, and not really authentic. But then I realized it was an act of generosity for the person listening, because it's making their life so much easier when you express yourself fully, or using all of the channels that you have with you. And authenticity has got nothing to do with it at that stage, because you've got to find the authenticity from within, not in terms of your movements and your voice. The authenticity comes from your heart, not from your hands and your face or your mouth. And that was a big reveal for me. And I show up different. I think I'm a gazillion times better leader than I ever have. I'm a much better presenter, a better coach, better communicator, better everything, because of Ariel and the work we do over there. So yes,
that sounds pretty amazing. That there's a point which I'd like to labor in this, actually, that you weren't, like, if you had just done the course online and you would kind of just watched all the material, and then even if it said, okay, now try this monologue and get yourself to a 10 out of 10, or get yourself to 7 out of 10 of expression, or whatever it is. Let's just say that the course was good enough to identify your goals and get you to that point. And then you go and do it, and you're on your own. There's no one else who's watching you. And then you're like, yeah, I just did like 10 out of 10. I did 30 out of 10. This is awesome. You'd never have gotten that feedback if you weren't part of the group or part of the community.
No, you don't see your blind spots, Harry, and you need someone else to see them, because that's why they're blind. You don't see them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of having a coach or having someone who is observing you from a different perspective, and that's what was happening.
What age was that when you started to learn that fear, like the overexpression, is actually an act of generosity?
55.
Hmm. And when
55.
and when did coaching start? Like when did you start coaching people as
I've
well?
always been a coach. I've been coaching people from probably from the age of 45
Yeah. Okay.
to this day. To this day,
Hmm.
but I think I'm a much better coach, much better coach now than I ever have been. Not because of expression, but about what I've learned about myself, about authenticity, where to look, where to go, where to find the stuff inside of you. In certain aspects, I also do coaching from a very strategic point of view, which has got nothing to do with that. But also, but in terms of the individual, like if you talk to most of the people I coach are executives, and they all have similar things. I want to increase my level of influence. I want to be able to deal with my boss better. I want to inspire my team. I want to be able to rise above my stakeholders for that promotion. My peers, I should say, for that promotion. It's a similar sort of thing that you find generally speaking. And when you put presence in front of them, they go, oh, wow. How do you tell a story, a personal story, as a way of engaging a client, your team, your boss? Um, those sorts of things can absolutely elevate you to a place of standing out. So that's kind of how it's affected my coaching, because I tend to bring a lot more of my presence knowledge into coaching than my HR stuff. So I come from an HR background, lots of HR skills, a learning and development. I've probably taught in person. I think one of the person who's building my website got me to sit down and we put a pen to paper and we did an estimate of the sorts of numbers of people I train. We think it's over 30,000 over my career of being in learning and development. Uh, I kind of have all those things, but the present stuff is the thing that seems to bring the greatest thing with my coaching when people go, how do I increase my influence? And and a lot of it comes down to how you show up in those high stakes moments. We all have these high stakes moments, these moments of truth, another way to put it. And how do we show up in a way that is memorable, is authentic, is powerful, impactful, all of those sorts of things.
Is that what
So yeah,
presence
that's
is?
kind of
Is that what you mean by presence?
present. We define presence as being able to appeal to the hearts and minds of others and build authentic relationships to get people towards a desired outcome. So it's hearts and mind. A lot of the stuff we do, Harry, as you probably know, and you're in mindfulness, so you would know exactly what this is about. We lose the connection between heart and head. We live in this world which is so cognitive. Everything is, what do you think? What do you see? The visual cortex is the thing that it kind of appeals to everyone. But being able to appeal to the emotions, the heart, and the intuition, the authenticity, the gut is something we tend to not pay attention to. It's tell me what you think. Tell me what's going on in your mind. It's not what's going on in your heart. Tell me how you feel. What's your intuition say about this? We don't ask those sorts of questions very much in the corporate world. You know, we're all about putting the deck together in a way which has no spelling mistakes and has good pictures and makes it readable. And we agonize over that, and we forget about the fact that there's a conversation that needs to happen with it as well. So yeah, kind of those are the things that I work on. And I love it. I love that part of my role. And again, it's an evolution, right? Given everything I've been through, that's where it comes. And the mindfulness stuff, the intersectionality of the mindfulness, the the stuff I do with men and masculinity, my coaching, all of the training I've done in leadership and sales management and professional skills, all come together, and it's a lovely dance, if you know what I mean.
It is. Yeah, I mean, there are a few ways to look at them. People who are listening to this might be thinking, "Oh, yeah, that sounds great. That's really nice," but it might not quite click for them. Um, and so, like, there's a difference between how we choose to perceive the world and how we choose to interact with others, and how we choose to act so that others will perceive us in a particular way. There's a difference in terms of how much tension we have within us, how we choose to express it versus how we choose to hide it, or if we choose to express it in a more effective way. There are differences between what happens, how we perceive it, how our perception makes us feel, and then what we choose to act as a result of that. And I think that most people can't really like narrow it down. Like they can't chunk those down. They don't see a difference between what's happened and how they've perceived it to happen, and
Mm.
then how they feel as a result of how they perceived it to happen. They're just like, that
Mm.
person said so and so, and so I'm angry, and so it's just
Yeah.
all in the one.
There's a great. Can I just give you one quote which I heard the other day, which I
Please.
think is so in line with what you just said over there about something that happens and the perception you have. And it's an African proverb that says the true. Let me get it right. The true story of the lion hunt will never be known if the teller of the story is the hunter. Yeah. And there is always two sides, and perspective is being able to take the two sides. Now, you do a lot of meditation and mindfulness, and you probably would have heard of the 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 stones, the circle of stones in the Buddhist. So they look at a tree. They have these stones that sit around, say, a tree, and they go and meditate on each of the stones that go around the tree, which gives them a different perspective as they look at the tree from different angles. And I think one of the things we, in the fast-paced world we have that we're looking at, we lose our curiosity and we go to judgment too quickly. And our curiosity is about being able to interrogate our perspective. I've seen something and I'm judging it already. And curiosity, I use this quite a lot, curiosity and judgment aren't great bedfellows. It's like a light switch. You cannot have both at the same time. You're either curious or you're judgmental,
Reminding me of
right?
Cesar Chaminade. Chaminade, Chamin. Maybe you can help me with pronouncing the last name. Are you familiar with him?
The flow,
Uh,
the guy.
no, Saboteurs.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes.
um,
I have seen his stuff. I'm not. I can't say I'm really familiar with it, but I do know of it.
right. He talks about our saboteurs, and all the saboteurs feed the judge of self, judge of others,
Yeah.
judge of circumstance,
Yes.
and that one. And he's got these power games. If anyone goes to read the book, it's amazing. I think it's called Positive Intelligence. It's one of the most life
Yes.
changing books in my experience, at least. Uh, and what I find like what's what I remembered straight away. So thank you for sharing that, because it reminded me of this, which I haven't thought of for a while. But one of his power games or power moves is to become the fascinated anthropologist,
Yeah.
to turn on curiosity above anything else, specifically because it's really
Mm.
hard for the judge to be involved and engaged if you're seeing what's happening as if it's the first time you're ever seeing it, as if you're really seeing it
Yeah.
with child's eyes.
Yeah. I agree with you. And my daughter once asked me about a tattoo, and she said, "Dad, would you ever get a tattoo?" And the only time I've ever thought about getting a tattoo is something on my wrist over here that just says, "Stay curious." Right? Stay
Right.
curious. And I think if that's a great reminder, and I got to keep reminding myself because sometimes you will always get to judgment, Harry. You know, we always do. We're human beings. But if you can stay in that space of curiosity for just a few moments more, it changes everything.
I used to be a great coach for about 80% of people I'd interact with, and a very average or sub-average for the other 20%. And I I was at a point where one of my mentors was actually challenging me on it. Her name's Sarit Vandergraaf. She's amazing. I've learned a lot of coaching from her. She does a lot of executive coaching, especially stuff for non-for-profits. And she basically challenged me on who I actually want to be serving and why I'm doing coaching at all in the first place. And for me, it was because I wanted to create more of a positive impact on others around me. And it got to a point that I couldn't accept the 20% negative experiences. Like they weren't just not positive; they were negative. Uh, Even if that meant 80% amazing experiences
Mm.
for others. And uh, and throughout that, I realized that it was simply that I wasn't listening enough. Like this whole podcast, for as an example, is a an effect of and a practice towards being able to learn to listen and see other people's worldviews, even if I don't entirely agree with it, even if I just want to learn from someone who's had a very different experience growing up or in their life, to just be able to learn from it. And similarly in coaching, I started to learn to just ask questions or talk very minimally, at least for the first 15 minutes of the coaching conversation. Otherwise, I'll just jump to a conclusion, which is great for 80 to 85% of people I'm talking to. The conclusion's usually right. I've got a knack for that, but usually is not enough. Um, how do you apply curiosity as an executive coach, as a father, as a husband, as your role as a leader in your organization? How do you apply curiosity everywhere that you are and what you do?
Well, it starts with being very intentional,
Mhm.
as you are with this podcast. And I got to tell you, Harry, your listening skills are up there, mate.
Thank you.
um, I I think it's about being very, very intentional about being curious. And I fall off sometimes. Um, my daughter Molly, she used to be in manage a retail store, quite a stressful job because she was managing it and they all had targets. And I remember she came home one night and she was talking about her really stressful day at work, and she was quite emotional about the whole thing. And as she was telling me about the conversation with her manager and then what happened to one of her customers and then one of her team members, and I was going through my checklist of a great consultant and a good coach, not so good coach, but great consultant, going tick, 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 tick. And as soon as she finished, before she even finished, I said, okay, here's what you need to do. First of all, with your manager. Second of all, with your customer. Third of all, with one of your direct reports. And she just looked at me and she said, great, Dad. Thanks, I'm going. I said, what's up? She said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And I said, why? What's going on? She said, I just don't think you really are interested in listening. I was like, what? Here I do. I run this company that talks about presence and communication skills. And my daughter just told me I suck. Well, I have sucked in that interaction of listening. And she said, by telling me everything that you suggested, you've just put a judgment on me that I did everything I should have done wrong. You just judge me, and that's how I feel right now. So I don't want to talk about this. See ya. And she went into a room. And that hit me so hard, Harry. It was like, wow. So being intentional, I don't think it's natural. I think we all go to, fast-paced world. I think some people may have a natural penchant. I don't. I've got to be very conscious and very intentional about being curious. And when I am, I'm at my best. And when I'm not, I'm average.
Yeah, there are personality aspects which lead people towards
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. I had a guy named Dave Powers who we spoke about a bit about his personality model, objective personality. There are 512 different types, but there are a few key points that lead you towards recognizing if someone's going to be curious or not. Uh, I'm certainly not in the curious zone naturally, at least. You need a lot of growth mindset, and what
Mm.
you're talking about intentionality. Do you have any
I think
practices that remind you to be intentional?
Um, well, it's as I go into every situation, I do check in with myself, and that's something I've learned to do with the aerial stuff. And I think that helps me. Now, we all have personalities, right? I think underneath all of us is something that drives us. But we also have a choice in how we behave and how we show up. That's always a choice. And I think reminding myself that it may not be natural for me to be less judgmental and be more curious, but I can be curious if I want to. And if I'm intentional about it, I actually show up better and I'm learning. So your growth mindset that you talk about, that's it. That's my growth. I want to get better at it. I'm not the finished product by any means. I'm a work in progress.
How do you
And
define
I
growth
am
mindset?
that you're not there yet. I go back to the whole idea that you're always constantly learning to do better and be better, that you're not the finished product. So Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset is kind of where I first got introduced to it. And I always say, look, I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way. And I'm working hard towards doing whatever I want to do. And I think that's part of, we talked about one of my values as being learning and sharing.
Yes.
My growth mindset comes absolutely into that because I'm constantly got a thirst for learning about new ways to operate, new ways to show up in the world, new ways to be better, and sharing with people. And part of that is doing it myself, right? Absolutely doing it myself. So, yeah.
And that example you gave with your daughter is that sometimes you got to be really intentional about the learning side before the sharing side, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I like the growth mindset definition you've got, and like reframing the yet, like the I'm
Mm.
not there yet. Adding on yet is very powerful. My daughter now comes up to me. She's 3.5. She comes up to me and she's trying to do something and says, "Daddy, I can't do this." And I pretend to not. Did you hear something? And then just say, "Daddy, I can't do it yet. Can you show me?" uh, so she's getting there. She's
Yeah.
not there yet, but she's getting there. Um, I've always tried to adopt in a slightly different way, and I'm curious your take on this. Is that the growth mindset is the belief in your own ability to overcome any obstacles that come in your way or that you end up facing. So the belief that you are able to overcome any obstacles, even the ones you don't feel capable of achieving or overcoming yet. What do you think about that definition?
Um, what do I think about it? I'm leaning into it. I think I'm probably right as a definition. I'm not sure there are certain obstacles out of my control
Mm.
that I need to contemplate on and think about it as you were talking. But I do think a lot of the things that are within your control, if there are obstacles that are within your sphere of influence, so to speak, you can do something about it. A lot of it comes down to our self-limiting beliefs and our belief systems that have been, again, go back to beliefs that have been planted into us as children. We can. I'm so excited about my stage of life right now. I'm working with some collaborators on making a short film. I would never have thought of making a short film, and acting in it. That's not something I would have even thought about. But it's so captured my imagination that I want to do it, and I'm working really hard to do it as well as I can. Um, so I think these are things that, and I've just built a new leadership model with a colleague of mine in Canada, and we are looking, and we're very, very excited about it. Now, I've been working with leadership and other people's models for 30 years, 35, 40 years, I don't know, a long time. And I've never ever entertained the idea of coming up with my own. And all of a sudden, we have come up with this. And I just love where it's taken us, right? In this new places. So I think coming back to your definition of the obstacles, a lot of the beliefs that we have are self-limiting, and it's an old cliche, I know. And I do think there's a lot of truth in it. There's a lot of obstacles can be overcome if you believe you can do it. Um, there may be certain things that are, you know, health related and stuff. That's what I kind of go to when the sort of doubt that I have in my mind is if I had a traumatic health diagnosis, is that an obstacle I can overcome? I don't know.
Mm.
So I don't know
Would you
about
say
that,
that? Would you
but
say that the belief of being able to overcome that obstacle makes it more likely that you overcome it?
I think so. Like, my heart disease,
Mm-hmm.
I've reversed my heart disease is again something that someone had told me was not possible.
How did you reverse it?
Well, when I almost died 8 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
my cardiologist said to me, that's when I was upside down in the bed, and I thought I was it. That was curtains for me, and I wasn't ready to go. My cardiologist said to me, Andre, you're going to be on drugs for the rest of your life, and we're not going to do another bypass. I had a bypass at 42, which was from the first heart attack. We're not going to do another one. It's too dangerous, blah, 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 for whatever reasons. And that was what they told me. Those are the physicians that came and spoke to me. And my wife, when she was in India, Kathy, had been to an ashram doing yoga and had picked up this book which was called Reversing Heart Disease. And it was a tatty old book, and she brought it home. And we brought it back to us to Australia, and she brought it into hospital and said, "Hey, you might want to be interested in this." And I thought, oh, it was some get-rich scheme by some American who wants to, you know, suck all my money dry. But while I was in hospital, I started Googling it, and I found that there is a group of cardiologists working in the US that have determined that they can, in fact, reverse heart disease. So I decided to do that. So my regime is 5 things that I do. The first thing is I eat green. So I'm a whole food plant-based, to keep it crass, vegan for health reasons. And I have been for 8 years. Made a huge difference. Exercise with flexibility. So I do yoga and I go lots of walking. So I want to move, but I want to move with flexibility. Mindfulness to get rid of the stress. And that's when I was introduced to mindfulness 8 years ago, and I love it. Made a huge impact in my life. The fourth one, which is probably the most controversial one, is surround yourself with love, and that meant get rid of the toxic relationships around you, and that was the hardest thing to do. And the toxic relationships included people who are extended, clients, friends, extended family members to some degree. Who just, it's what I call psychic vampires. You probably know them, Harry. You show up and you leave and you go, I just feel so, all my energy is just depleted after hanging out with them. They're cynical and negative. They hate everyone and everything. They complain, the type, right? And the idea was to remove them from your life and actually have a proximity of people who are actually more positive and fulfill you, not deplete you.
Yes.
And that was the fourth one. And the fifth one, which is the one I added later on, was to just be more playful in life. And I find that when I'm playful, coming back to mindfulness, I am so much more present. And I realized that as I possibly people in this podcast might get a sense of, Jesus, very serious. And sometimes I've been accused of being very earnest, earnest in terms of intense. And I realized that when I'm playful, and I am playful at times, I'm at my best, and I'm certainly more present. So those are the 5 things I do. And I went back to, and I've been very, very strict about it. And I went back to my cardiologist a couple of years ago, and we did every test you could think of, every test. And he said to me, if I didn't know your history, Andre, I would have said, you have absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're in great shape. Keep it up. Do what you keep doing. So I do that to this day. And it's been amazing.
And now this is really cool. So the first 2 are basically all physical, right? Like your physical environment. The whole food vegan for 8 years.
Yep.
You can choose what goes into your body. You can basically stop the poison. That's entirely up to you. Or you can keep eating whatever you want to eat, but then just know that you're going to be limited as a result of it. And then choosing to exercise. And for flexibility, and also just for movement, right? So yoga and walking, or if you're a bit younger, maybe running and some other sports, which also allow you to be more playful, all that kind of stuff as well, right? So that's all very physical. But then the last 3, but especially number 3 and 4, are very mind-based. They're very big psychological shifts, right? Choosing to be more mindful and reducing stress. And then choosing the people that are around you so you can surround yourself with love. And I could imagine a lot of people listening are starting to wonder, but ask themselves or think to themselves, yeah, that's great, Andre. You found a way to be less stressful. Okay, well, maybe they found a way to be less stressful too, right? Maybe they found running and they don't really care for meditation or whatever, and that their exercise is able to kind of help them out just enough. But then surrounding yourself with love and removing toxic people from around you. How do you do it?
Great difficulty. So you've got to be, again, it comes back to intentionality of doing it, right? And you recognize that there's some people who you just don't want in your life anymore. And there are instances where you don't have a choice and you show up and they're there and they come at you. So I prepare for that. I prepare for those sorts of things in a way because I know it's going to let me be depleted. And there was a guy called, you probably heard of him, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who is, one of the thought leaders of the last 100 years, I guess. And when he was dying, and he was on his deathbed, a lot of his followers gathered around him and said, tell us, how is it that you always, the secret of your well-being? Why is it that you're always, nothing seems to faze you? And he said 5 words. He said, I, I don't mind what happens. I don't mind what happens. And I thought, oh, it's stupid. It's ridiculous. Well, Harry, I cannot tell you. That was only a lesson I learned about a year ago, by the way. I can't tell you the difference that has made in our lives, my wife and myself, of showing up in places where you have these toxic people and you say to yourself, and we remind each other, I don't mind what happens. It's, I'm here and I'm good with me, and nothing you say has got anything to do with me.
Then why do you
Right?
have
I
to?
don't mind what
Why do you have
happens.
to avoid those people?
Well, why do I avoid them?
Yeah.
Because they typically are the cynical ones that make me feel depleted. They're critical, angry, uh, pissed off at the world, and they share it with me, and they challenge me on being a vegan is a really good target, for example. Well, that's a stupid thing to do, we're ridiculous. Come and have a sausage, Andre, or those sorts of ridiculous things because they don't, but it's not just those things. It's not just having a go. It's just the energy that they bring in front of you. It's just a really toxic, negative energy. And when they, in before, in previous to me knowing how to deal with them, I would just be angry for days. I'd feel it would just have an impact on me. Rick Hansen talks about the Teflon brain and the Velcro brain. The Velcro brain is something is said that sticks with you for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and years maybe. Whereas that's usually the negative comment, the negative thing, a slight criticism, a joke about you, about your heritage, all of those sorts of things still happen, right? And they kind of deplete you. And they stick around. So I've got to be prepared for that. So one of the things I've learned recently is that I cannot always avoid those toxic people. As much as I can push them aside and put them on the back burner, there will be times when we show up at an event or I meet them somewhere or there's a new situation I'm at and there's someone just hammering uh, the whole energy depletion stuff. And I've got to then manage me, right? Which is, I don't mind what happens. This is their gig. I don't mind what happens. It's nothing to do with me. And I just got reminding myself. Whereas before I would just allow it to penetrate and hurt.
And so if we extend the theory, I'm really curious your thoughts on this because I don't have my mind made up on it. By the way, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying this is the way it is. My theory is that if you practice enough mindfulness, that the people around you either start to shift as they see you as a leader, even if they were previously toxic. They like you kind of um, two guys I know who both were monks for 10 and 12 years, Jai Kith and Rajan Shankara. They've both been on the podcast. They're amazing. One of them, Jai, I actually teach meditation with. Uh, they kind of just have this effect on people that even when those people are really toxic, like they or previously have various activities which is not filled with love or hope or joy. It's like everything's outside of them and they need everything to be a particular way in order to be happy. Otherwise, they're just miserable. That just their presence starts to influence the way that they are and the way that they act and the way they behave. And so they don't see as many toxic people anymore because they just present themselves. They show up differently to those toxic people. And then on the other side, even if there are toxic people, narcissistic, worst type of people, whatever that you could try and find, and there are terrible people around you, they're not phased by it. because they'd be as about upset at us as they would be from their car tire popping or from, I don't know, eating, realizing that their bread is stale. Like it's nothing to them. Like it doesn't make a difference. So
Mm.
if we extend it, like I'm really curious about how much does point three about mindfulness bleed into point four around surrounding yourself with the right people.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah.
curious what your experience is.
Yeah, I think I'm a work in progress. My growth mindset is the two people you talked about. I would love to be at that point. I don't think I am, and I think I'm on my journey towards it. I do think that theory is the right one.
Okay.
I I actually believe that, and as I get more into the mindfulness, uh, I realize that we are part of a system and that the way you change the system is by changing you. You know, there's a great story of the Hawaiian practice of hippo ono ono,
Yes.
where you've probably heard of it, right? Where this doctor at this mental health institute in Hawaii, which was incredibly challenging and difficult, showed up and changed it just by the way he showed up every day. And it took 4 years, but he managed to turn it around where it had an impact on the inmates and on the staff and everybody else. And the whole idea is that you are part of a system. And by changing you, you are adjusting the system. So I do believe that. And I think I've got to get better at it. And I wish I was further down the track in my journey of showing up in a way. Like the two people you talk about, that sounds amazing to me. But I am deadly keen on being that way, of being able to show up with the the mindfulness, with the presence, with being present with them, being listening, and which may change them and doesn't affect me from time to time as much as it does. So I think that's part of my learning. I'm not there yet for sure.
Can I share something with you? I just went to look it up because it feels so relevant, and you've reminded me of something else. So thank you. You know that gun, or that quote which was misappropriated towards Gandhi, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Right?
Hmm.
And it's like, hang on, wait, that's nowhere near as deep as what he actually meant it to be. Now, because that basically most people take that and go, oh, right. So if you want to make a change in the world, then you just need to start making the change. So if you want to see clean beaches, go and clean the beaches yourself. Okay, that's fine. But Gandhi meant it so much deeper, and this sounds like a perfect opportunity to share it. Do you want me to share the quote?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just brought it up now. We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world will also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is at the source of our happiness. We do not wait to see what others do.
That's beautiful.
And it just
I've never heard that, by
right.
the way. That's
I'll
great.
I'll send that link to you shortly.
Yeah, send it to me.
But it's powerful, right? We don't just need to see the world in a particular way. We just need to be closer towards reality. We don't need to do things to change the world the way we want it to be. We just need to start perceiving the world we want it to be, and then the right
Mm.
action will follow.
Yeah. You know, I one of the things that I've learned is how I show up, and we do it an aerial, but I think again it's a bit like you scratch the surface and then you see there's this incredible roots that sit underneath it. But in aerial we talk about how do you show up in front of others. And I think as I'm learning and bringing in that intersectionality about mindfulness and men's support groups and the work we do in leadership, I really do believe how we show up has a huge impact on the system, on the world, on the human systems that are around us. Uh, so I think there is definitely something there which I want to keep exploring for sure.
So as we keep going through this, like that kind of brings us sort of to where you are in your journey right now, right? Is there any part of your journey we haven't explored yet?
I think I'm probably at the best. I'm at the happiest place I've ever been in my life, put it that way. And I'm 65. I have more energy than I have now. I have more energy now than I had probably in my 20s and 30s. I again, it's probably to do with my health regime, but I think a lot of it's got to do with my emotional stability, if you like, or my view of the world, my perspectives, my learning. And as we come back to that circle of, living my life in concert with my values, there's still things I want to achieve. There's definitely goals ahead of me that I know I'm going to go for. But, you know, it's this being open to whatever is out there. I would never have guessed so many things would have happened to me in the last 10 years, if you like, 15 years when we went to India, since that decision to get out of corporate life, become a corporate refugee, so to speak, and go and do it on yourself. Best decision for me in terms of my development, my self-development, my self-understanding, self-awareness, personal growth. I don't know whichever way you want to measure it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to it's the happiest I've ever been. Happiest I've ever been. And I love the fact as to what the next adventure is going to be because who knows? There's still question marks on what that is, and something may appear tomorrow, which is going to be it's just going to be so 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 good. So I just got to leave space to make sure I have some of those things and embrace those as they come. That's all.
Okay, so I've been listening to you share all this, and I've been writing down some questions throughout as we get towards the end. I know we've been going for
Sure.
an hour and 49 minutes already. This is some really cool stuff. So thank you. Uh, to to start with, I mean, can you share some examples of great leadership, either great people or just great tendencies of great leaders?
There's probably some tendencies that I kind of look for. One is they give me clarity. They give clarity. Out of the fog that lies ahead of you, they have this amazing sense of bringing clarity to the table. And clarity is one of those things that really empowers people. Because when people, if you're driving down a winding mountain road in fog, you go very slow and you're very cautious and you make slow progress. A good leader who can actually blow the fog away, I think, is a really key part of it. So giving clarity is a certain thing. The second thing that they do is they can bring people together and bringing those people together in a way which is not just a team, but it could be an organization, it could be customers, it could be external stakeholders as well. But they have this amazing knack of unifying people. And I think that's a tendency that is really, really critical with leaders. And the probably the third thing I would say is that they have this ability to resilience, if you like, or agility to deal with whatever unexpected wildcards come their way. A good leader is not phased. They would have to stop and pause and take stock, but are not phased by adversities when they happen. The market crashes or something bad happens in an organization, the CEO leaves, whatever. They have this ability to be able to ride that storm. And I think that's the things that I look for when I see great leaders. It's kind of what they do. Um, um, so yeah, it's those things. I mentioned to you that we're coming up with this leadership model,
Yeah.
which we have, I'm very excited about,
Hmm.
and we talk about it in terms of your head, heart, hands, and feet. So the first thing is to think like a leader. And a lot of times people don't think like a leader. It doesn't matter how far up you are. And thinking like a leader is using your head. Then you've got to engage people emotionally. And a lot of the work we do at Ariel, for example, is drawing on that emotional connection and connecting the head and the heart together. The third thing is the hands, which is the skills you do. How do you show up? How do you run great meetings? How do you give feedback? How do you present? The skills of leadership. And the fourth thing is the feet, which is make it happen, right? Your feet actually takes a group of people from A to B by course correcting and dealing with trouble and all of those sorts of things that happen. So we are building this because based on all of the experience that my colleague and myself has, he's in Canada, I have on this. We're really excited about something that we think is relevant in the modern day post COVID with AI at our doorstep. The threat of collapse of economies and world wars. and all the things that are going on in the world, that the need for leadership is just so critical right now. So yeah, we we're kind of working on this, and we've been doing it now for about uh, 6 months, and very excited. Probably going to be a few more months before we're ready to take it out, but that's kind of really cool. It's a really cool thing to do.
This is really cool. I mean, the as you were sharing those, I was thinking a lot about how this doesn't just apply in business context. It applies in lots of contexts, like in almost every context, right? Self leadership,
Hmm.
leadership in your family as well, which you referenced a few times throughout the conversation, like giving clarity to your family, bringing your
Hmm.
family together, and dealing with the emotions of your kids or your spouse or any external wild cards that might come in that might impact your family as well. It's all leadership, right? You got to think it, feel it. You got to have your skills or
Hmm.
develop the skills, and you got to make it happen or work out how you're going to make it happen. And then also in your own life, and that I think a big part of the bringing people together is building the team around you as well. So if you can't find your blind spots, build your team. Find a coach who will help you find them. If you
Yeah.
don't have the education or the skills that you need, then find the advisor or the consultant who's going to be able to help you with it.
Hmm.
I really like that framework. It's really cool. Um, okay, I actually have a lot of questions, but I'm mindful of time as well, and we're very soon to go on 2 hours of recording. So I'm what I'll do is I'll give a as brief as possible summary of what you've of the amazing information which you've already shared in this conversation, and you'll have the opportunity to correct it, adjust it, add to it, take something out of it. Um, but this is what you've shared in these couple of hours. And then, of course, you can share some other wisdom at the end of it if you wanted to, as a final note for listeners. Um, okay, so when we started exploring what success or how do you define success, you said that it's been a long way. You feel like you're pretty close to it. You've got your blind spots. You've had a lot of privileges. You've been growing up, even though you had racism when you were young and discrimination. You've always kind of had like you've been in affluent environments, or at least in India, you were in a well-off environment as well. And you've kind of come down to the point of going, it's living my life in concert with my values. Um, and when it was money, it was about goals. It wasn't about values. And so the goals are things that you're driving for and wanting to achieve. It's the finite game versus infinite game, and that of course is more around how you're progressing in your life. Right? There's no use by date. So you got to reveal your values. You have this view that you don't set your values, but you can reveal the values of what's important to you. And you could probably also choose how you live your life in line with those values. But if you're not aware of those values, then they're kind of just like this invisible hand that's guiding you. You don't know where it's taking you, right? You share that your 5 values are autonomy, being comfortable in your own skin, having a super connected family, learning and sharing. And we spoke later on about the importance of spending more time with the learning rather than just with the sharing. And then collecting adventures, looking at everything as an adventure. Going to the grocery store is an adventure. Going to the Himalayas is an adventure. Um, going off to going for a drive somewhere is an adventure. Seeing someone new is an adventure. Even probably surrounding yourself with toxic people because culturally you just have to do it every now and then is an adventure, right? Um, basically, you came from India when you were 12 years old. Before that, you've been living 9 months a year in like boarding school when you were 7 years old. You learned about resilience and adventure and wanting the unknown. And on the downside, you kind of always felt like you needed to get a good status being in that type of environment. And then you probably felt like you still needed a good status while you're in Australia, but you suddenly felt like you were down, like right at the bottom, as opposed to relatively always being at the top. And you were angry about that stigma. You put on masks. You're a people pleaser. And that was a strength for you as well because it made you a really good listener, which you might not have had that skill otherwise. And if you paid attention to people, then they'd kind of value being around or accept you being around. You bombed HSC, and what does successful even mean? And you kind of decided, well, I'm just going to have some fun instead. I'll get a guitar, and they'll get the girls, and they'll be all good. And so in the '70s, you're going around riffing to Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, and then your belief system and your parents basically kicked in and says you got to get the money, you got to go make money, you got to go get a job. And so you went back to uni, you studied in HR, and you had a lot of corporate success, and that basically cost you your marriage. Your relationship was already flawed. There was a lot of criticism at home for not being good enough, or father as a husband, and you got a lot of praise at work. So of course, you just naturally keep going back to work, and less time at family, and you just kind of wouldn't stand up for it at home, and you just enjoy it and relish in it at work. And then you realize that there was a huge hole in your heart, and you had literally your first heart attack at 42. Um, at In your second marriage, though, everything was brilliant. Everything you needed and wanted from your partner. It sounds like she really understood you, that she engaged with you and was open to you engaging with her as well on various things. And you really approached things as a team. It only took her 30 seconds to agree to go to India with you. Um, you had two more kids. You moved to India for work, and you were able to live more authentically because while you were there, you fell in love with the country and you fell in love with who you were at the same time. Uh, I think you said, I embraced the brownness in me, or the brown in me. Uh, you came back so your daughters could finish work, but you kept going back every 4 months or so. And that was another wonderful, huge adventure. But anyway, so since you were 45, you've been a coach. Um, and you found that the expressing yourself has been a key influencer in making you an even better coach. So the ability to influence others has also been enhanced directly by your ability to influence others, and to be able to listen and to express the way that you feel. And so ever since you were coach, you said you started coaching at 45, but you only became a really good coach when you were 55, I think you said, because you started learning how to overcome that fear of expression. And then you could help people with all the goals that they wanted, to increase their influence, to deal with your boss better, to inspire your team, to rise above your peers for your promotion. And you've been able to help them with that by also being able to instill a sense of presence, heart and mind authentically aligned. And later on, you shared, when it comes to leadership, you also have your hands and your feet as well to actually make it happen. Um, and we tend to be too close to, or too quick to judge, and too far away from curiosity. And you said that the way to be curious is it always needs to start and end in intentionality. Very, very, very intentional, to the extent that you check in with yourself before every situation, or almost every situation. If you forget to with your daughter, for example, it might not work so well. Um, and you made a really cool point about how you always have the choice to show up the way that you want to be. And to you, that's your growth mindset. You're just not there yet. You're there, you're going to get there, but you're not there yet. You found a way to reverse heart disease, your whole food, plant based diet, exercising for flexibility. So your yoga and your walking and your mindfulness and meditation, which we didn't actually dive that much into, but that's fine. Yeah, we'll get there. Surrounding yourself with love and removing the toxic people around you, and just being more playful and more present. And it got to the point where we were sharing or where you shared that you're 65 and you're happier in your life and enjoy your life more, and you have more energy than you did in your 20s and your 30s, which goes to show for everyone here that it really is never too late. Um, and we did talk about adversity as well, responding to adversity. And you said you could be a victim. Oh no, it's so unfair. Everything's so hard. And you could be a survivor and say, I'm just going to get through this. I'm just keeping my head above water. I'm just going to be okay. I'll keep my head down. I'll get through it. Or you could be a navigator, and you can use all of your experiences in life to make the most of your life as well. So that's what I got from you. Did I miss anything?
Wow, I'm blown away, Harry. That's an amazing summary. I didn't even see you taking notes. There you go. That's fantastic. Yeah, look, the only thing I would add to that is, so, a lot of my friends around me look at me and say, geez, Andre, 65, you must be starting to slow down now. And I go, why? It's the, I have more wisdom than I've ever had in my life. I've got more experiences that I want to share. Why do I turn the volume down? This is the time to turn the volume up, right? And I don't know. The exciting thing about the future is I don't know where it's going to go. I might make a movie. I might make a small movie. I might go and create another course. I might go and do something completely different. Who knows? But just being open to it, and not about extinguishing that flame, because I think I see a lot of times people reach a certain point and they go, okay, I need to relax, I need to slow down, and the flame goes out and life goes with them when that happens. And it's often the retirement word, when people look at retirement and you can just see the physical slow down, the mental slow down, and the flame goes out. And I think part of my advice to anyone is, don't let the flame go out.
Don't let the flame go out. Is there anything else you really want people to learn from this conversation?
There's lots, but no, I think that's pretty good, Harry. I'm really appreciative of because what I've got out of it is you've allowed me to consolidate just by talking, and you doing that summary over there has allowed me to consolidate a lot of my thinking. That makes me feel good, makes me feel happy, it makes me feel fulfilled in some degree that I could spend a couple of hours with you.
Thank you. And I'm not going to let you go just yet, because I want to get something really practical for the listeners. And you made the final point you were trying to say, don't let the flame go out, which is almost synonymous to keep the flame going and keep fanning it, keep burning it. How can someone do that? If you could share with them just 1, 2, or 3 things that they could do after listening to this, and they're at the point that they've stayed with you for 2 hours. Somehow they've stayed listening to us for 2 hours, and they're going, okay, this is really helpful stuff, and I want to make a change in my life. What are the practical things that they can start doing right now to fan the flame?
Simple. Invest in you. Invest in the things that light you up. Invest in the things that bring you joy, whatever that is. And I can't tell you what that might be, but it's when we stop investing is that the decay starts. We invest a lot in ourselves when we're in our 20s and 30s and in corporate life, in our 40s even. But then as we get to our 50s, we go into this cruise mode and start to wind down, start to rust, if you like, a little bit. I think this is what we talked about, learning and growing and sharing. Just keep investing in you. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you have to go to uni, but if you love, I don't know, growing bonsai plants, become really good at it and teach people and share the joy. I think for me, the secret of happiness is always serving others. And I think as long as you're serving others, that flame will be there. And I look at, the Blue Zone stuff that exists, and I've looked at the Dan Buettner stuff of people as they age. People have a purpose in their life, just don't die. Clint Eastwood's 92 and he's making movies still. He doesn't need the cash, but he has this passion to make movies. And I just, one of the guys in my men's table is 89. He writes a newsletter on masculinity every month, 89. And he struggles to do it, but he does it. That's it. That's where the flame is, right? Find the thing in you that's going to invest in it. That's it. There's nothing more practical I can give you than just look at when was the last time you invested in yourself to push yourself further along your passion or the thing that lights you up.
As opposed to feeling like you're a victim that you can't do it.
Yeah, or you're too old and I can't move, and my mind's a bit slow, and I'm not as quick anymore, and I struggle with learning, and those are all victim and survival. It's not navigating. It's not navigator behavior, because I think you can. I look at the guy I was talking to at our men's table, as I said, 89, and he is researching every week for new stuff to put in his newsletter, which goes out. I just inspired by that.
Thank you, Andre. I really appreciate your time and your energy and everything throughout this conversation. Really helpful conversation to anyone who's listening, and I hope that they really take some of the practical outcomes that you've shared. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Harry, it's been a pleasure. It's good to connect with you.
So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, Practice it now. Be the successful person you're meant to be. Live with purpose.